far as the death of one child with a cracked skull, there's a lot of skull cracking going on with these people that are tied to both Romney and Obama. Let me tell you how, or suggest how. Stericycle is a corporation which Romney and Bain had $75 million plugged into, and what Stericycle did, and probably still does, is incinerate fetuses. What a lovely guy you are, Romney. Those are human beings, and they were created by God, and yet you like to profit from incinerating them. David, unbeknownst to you, because this stuff comes in so fast all day long that I don't have time to even talk to myself. Unbeknownst to you, yesterday from a source in Chicago, I got a 5-page segment out of about a 90-page congressional record where Obama is quoted as interrupting. They were coming up with some new rules on partial birth abortion, and Obama's comment will make anyone that has any type of morality or compassion absolutely sick. In response to another lawmaker saying that if the baby is delivered live and the doctor has to kill it when it's out of the womb, blah, blah, blah. There's some, and I've got the whole thing word for word, and it will be in Chapter 7 word for word, and Barry Soetoro can kiss my rosy red rear if he doesn't like it.
Senate Bill 1663, an act concerning abortion. Third reading of the bill.
Senator O'Malley.
Mr. President, again, thank you. This is the third component of the Born Alive package. And what it provides is that a child born under any circumstances would receive all reasonable measures consistent with good medical practice. It also requires a second physician to give an opinion of viability and to deliver such reasonable measures of care as are defined in 1663. Again, I'd be happy to answer any questions there may be.
Is there any discussion? Senator Cullerton.
Would the sponsor yield?
Sponsor indicates he'll yield.
Senator O'Malley, which one of these bills was the Medical Society, did they testify against? Was it all three of them or just this one?
Senator O'Malley.
I really can't speak for them, but I suspect their major issue was with 1661.
Any further discussion? Senator Obama.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the sponsor yield for a question?
Sponsor indicates he'll yield.
Yeah, just along the same lines, obviously there's an issue that we've debated extensively both in committee and on the floor, so I don't want to belabor it, but I did want to point out, as I understood it during the course of the discussion in committee, one of the things that we were concerned about, or at least I expressed some concern about, was what impact this would have with respect to the relationship between the doctor and the patient, and what liabilities the doctor might have in this situation. So can you just describe for me, under this legislation, what's going to be required for a doctor to meet the requirements that you've set forth?
Senator O'Malley.
Senator Obama, first of all, there is established under this legislation that a child born under such circumstances would receive all reasonable measures consistent with good medical practice, and that's as defined, of course, by the the practice of medicine in the community where this would occur. It also requires, in two instances, that that an attending physician be brought in to assist and advise with respect to the issue of viability, and in particular, where there's a suspicion on behalf of the physician that the child may be viable, that there's a suspicion, so that the attending physician would make that decision as to whether that would be the case. The other one is where the child is actually born alive and then is actually born alive, in which case then the physician would call as soon as practically possible for a second physician to come in and determine the viability.
Senator Obama.
So, and again, I'm not going to prolong this, but I just want to be clear because I think this was the source of the objections of the Medical Society. As I understand it, this puts the burden on the attending physician, who has determined, since they were performing this procedure, that in fact this is a non-viable fetus, that if that fetus or child, however way you want to describe it, is now outside the mother's womb, and the doctor continues to think that it's non-viable, but there's, let's say, movement or some indication that in fact they're not just coming out limp and dead, that in fact they would then have to call a second physician to monitor and check off and make sure that this is not a live child that could be saved. Is that correct?
Senator O'Malley.
In the first instance, obviously the physician that is performing the procedure would make the determination. The second situation is where the child actually is born and is alive. And then there's an assessment, an independent assessment of viability by another physician at the soonest practical date or time.
Senator Obama.
Let me just go to the bill very quickly. Essentially, I think, as this emerged during debate and during committee, the only plausible rationale to my mind for this legislation would be if you had a suspicion that a doctor, the attending physician, who has made an assessment that this is a non-viable fetus, and that, let's say for the purposes of the mother's health, is being, that labor is being induced, that physician, A, is going to make the wrong assessment, and B, if the physician discovered after the labor had been induced that in fact he made an error or she made an error, and in fact that this was not a non-viable fetus but in fact a live child, that physician of his own accord or her own accord would not try to exercise the sort of medical measures and practices that would be involved in saving that child. Now, if you think that there are possibilities that doctors would not do that, then maybe this bill makes sense. But I suspect, and my impression is that the Medical Society suspects as well, that doctors feel that they would be under that obligation, that they would already be making these determinations, and that essentially adding an additional doctor who then has to be called in an emergency situation to come in and make these assessments is really designed simply to burden the original decision of the woman and the physician to induce labor and perform an abortion. Now, if that's the case, and I know that some of us feel very strongly one way or another on that issue, that's fine, but I think it's important to understand that this issue ultimately is about abortion and not live births, because if these are children who are being born alive, I at least have confidence that a doctor who is in that room is going to make sure that they're looked after. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? If not, Senator O'Malley to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the comments from the previous speaker, but I can assure you that the interest of everybody, I think, in this state would be to protect the life of a child, including the physicians who are involved there. And I believe that the second opinion physician would actually, in many ways, protect not only the interests of that child, which is its primary responsibility, but to make sure that if there was any error in judgment of any kind by the primary physician, that the burden associated with that failure in decision would be minimized. And so I request your support of this legislation so that this package can move to the Illinois House, where it can be given some serious consideration. Thank you.